Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. This week, our guest is Philippe Bouissou, who is the managing partner at Blue Dots Partners. Welcome.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me on your show.
Great. So, Philippe, you have a very large background here. You have a couple PhDs. One of them's in physics. You've done a lot of things with businesses and helping businesses grow. One of the many businesses that you worked with was Apple, and helping them in their e-commerce going from zero to, as we see it as today. What made you go from getting your PhD in physics to working in business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really like people. I like building relationships and friendships with people. And when you do research in physics, you work in a very deep and narrow groove. There are very, maybe 100, 200 people in the world that really understand what you're doing, because it's very, very specialized. And so therefore, you don't really interact with a lot of people. You don't really meet a lot of people. And so I always wanted to do business, but I was always loved physics. So I said, well, how do I do both? And the idea was, well, why don't I go through a physics, curriculum and do my PhD? And then I transitioned to business. And there were really one key reason, which is that I think that if you think in terms of physics and you look at the world from that perspective, the way you look at the world is quite different from most people who don't have that background. Mm-hmm. And so it gives me an edge and an advantage, because I tend to look at things quite differently from the majority of people because of my physics background, because I think about physics. And so that is really an advantage. The other thing is, I really wanted to understand what it means to do research in physics or in chemistry or in math. And it's like I was thinking, when you get up in the morning, what do? You get up and you do research. Well, how does that mean? How does that creative process really work? And I was really intrigued by that. And this is why I wanted to finish my PhD and really get a good sense of what it means to do research in physics or in math and other fields.
Yeah. So a lot of what you've done for companies is grow their top line. Mm-hmm. And you've done that kind of different than a lot of other, I'm going to call it growth coaches, if you want to call it. And one of the things is you've written a book, Aligning the Dots. How does this business growth book differ from the other traditional books that are out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is very different. I've been on the board of 23 companies. I'm on 2 boards right now. And the companies always struggle with, what do we do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow faster?
Right.
And it's a deceptively simple question, but really hard to answer. It's very much similar to, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to be a good parent? Well, you don't even know where to start, right? You can read books, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to figure it out. And every company and every child is different. And the traditional way of solving that problem is to focus very quickly on sales, because the top line revenue is revenue. And people always think, well, I'm not growing fast enough because I'm not selling enough, which is true. But the reason they're not selling enough is not necessarily because their salespeople, the way they sell is wrong. And so the traditional way is to, let's just hire the new VP of sales. Let's change our sales force. Let's tweak our compensation package. Let's give discounts. Let's offer discounts. So pricing is really not really well thought out. And what I realized, let's try a new marketing thing, or let's change our logo. I mean, those kinds of things. And those things really never work at least in my experience. And the reason is because they don't fundamentally answer the question on, why are you not growing as fast as you'd like? And so I realized that one day, and it was the big epiphany I had a few years ago, which was that the maximum growth rate of any business, regardless of what the business is, where it operates, or how big it is, that maximum growth rate can only be achieved when the business and its target market are perfectly aligned. So it's fundamentally a matter of alignment, and it's because the business is misaligned somewhere that it's not growing as fast as it could. And then the next question is, well, what does it mean to be aligned? And that's really what the book is all about, and how do you rectify and identify those misalignments? So it's a very, very different approach from the traditional way of thinking about growing faster for any business.
So what are some of the you're saying to the business and the sales need to be aligned with your target and stuff. What are some of the mistakes or the biggest mistakes that you're seeing businesses do that are making them misaligned?
Well, there are four types of alignment, and I can go through them very quickly to kind of frame this discussion. One is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the business makes have to be aligned. So if you come to me, Gary, and you say, I have a headache, and I show you a stomachache pill, well, your pain and my claim are clearly not aligned. You will never buy my pill, and you shouldn't.
Right.
The second misalignment is the way the claim is expressed, which is the marketing, the messaging, the positioning, and the way the claim is understood, which is the perception. Sometimes those two things are misaligned, and if they are, you're not going to grow as fast as you can. So imagine I have a pill for your headache, but I describe it to you in Korean, and you don't understand, you don't speak Korean, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Then you will never buy the pill because you're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Even though it's the perfect pill for your headache, it'll be gone in 10 minutes. So that's the second axis. The third one is the way customers want to buy and the way the product is sold in the marketplace have to be aligned. So imagine I said, Gary, I've got the pill for your headache, but I'm in the Bay Area, you have to fly to San Francisco to get it. You're going to say, well, wait a minute, there's a pharmacy just down the street from where I live. Why can't I just go to the pharmacy and pick up the pill? That's the third axis. And then the fourth axis, which is my favorite one, because I stole it out of the Apple playbook, is that so I work directly for Steve Jobs, which is how I lost my hair, in case you ever wonder. But there are a few really insightful lessons I learned from Steve. And one of them really struck me and became the foundation of this fourth axis of alignment. And Steve really made me realize that there is one and only one business on this entire planet. I understood that everybody is in the exact same business. There are not 2 or 3 or 4 or million businesses. There's only one. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. So let me repeat this because this is really fundamental. There's only one business on this planet, no matter what you do, is that you have to deliver and delight your customers. That's the business you're in.
Right.
And so the fourth axis of alignment is the alignment between the expected delight and what the company actually delivers to its customers. Those two things have to be aligned. So imagine if you finally get my pill for your headache, you swallow it, and after a while your headache is persistent and you start to feel dizzy and you don't feel better. Well, obviously that's not what you expected. Right. So there's a misalignment between what you expected and what I actually delivered to you. So the 4 universal axes of alignment, and they are truly universal, they apply to any business, is that the pain of the customer and the claim the business makes have to be aligned, that the perception of the customer and the expression of the claim, which is the messaging, have to be aligned, that the way customers want to buy and the way you sell have to be aligned, and what your customer expect in terms of delight and what you actually deliver to them have to be aligned. And if you perfectly align your business along those 4 axes of alignment, you will reach the maximum possible growth rate within your target market. And so to answer your question, to go back to your question is, well, what mistakes do they make? Well, they are misaligned in one or several of those 4 axes, which is why they are not growing as fast as they can.
So that's why you're saying that, lots of times, people will go in and replace salespeople or do their logo or whatever. Long term, that doesn't cure the problem. Sometimes that's just a short-term fix, but they still haven't sat back and done the 4 alignments that you're talking about.
That's correct. You have to step back and you have to say, which of those 4 axes am I misaligned? And then you can put together a growth playbook, as we call it, which is an action plan that will tell you what to do. But starting by changing your sales force, you haven't started by the beginning, which is to answer the question, where am I misaligned and why? And then you can fix it. And that's why the traditional methods don't work, because you're kind of blind. You're trying things, but you don't really know fundamentally why.
Yeah, this is definitely conceptually much different than any other type of business growth that I've ever read or learned about, because so many times it's just like go 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 go, you got to work harder, you got to do more, you got to do more type thing, and not sitting back and making sure that everything is aligned properly.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So from a conventional wisdom standpoint, this is definitely different than most processes that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I let's put it this way. I've never found a company or a consulting organization that does it this way. And then we're actually going much further, which is we measure those 4 axes of alignment from 0 to 100%. We've developed a dozen of tools. So we're very data-driven. We're very analytical at Blue Dots. And we can measure those coefficients of alignment. And by measuring, then that's how we understand exactly what the company is misaligned. And then we can deliver the growth playbook. So it's not just thinking you're misaligned on the second axis is actually, well, my alignment on the second axis is 62.3%. So I have like almost 40% to change.
Right.
And because I did that measurement, I know where the misalignments come from. So it's a bit like you're looking at an X-ray, you see a line on the bone, and I'm telling you, I said, look, you have a fracture. That's what's going on. Well, if I don't take the X-ray, it's really hard to figure out that you have a fracture. You can have so many other things. So the measurement and the tools are really critical, because that's what gives you the blood work results and the cell counts, and the oxygen level and all that stuff. And if you don't do that, it's really hard to help the patient.
Right. Now, Philippe, most of our clients that our clients, but then also our listeners, many of them are I'm going to say small business. We're not Apple or Cisco or any of these.
Right.
How do we take what you're doing and apply this to our business? Because, again, you're talking about taking these measurements and doing these different things. How can someone in a small business be able to take your book and apply this to their business?
Yeah, so it works exactly the same way. I think the only difference is that they may not be able to measure it at the level of precision that we like from a statistical standpoint, because they may not have, 1,000 customers. Maybe they only have 20 or 30 or 50 or 100.
Right.
But even with 20 or 50, you can still talk to them and you can still measure the alignments based on the interviews and the questions you ask. The principles themselves, the 4 principles of alignment, apply exactly the same way. In fact, I'm in Silicon Valley. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are just have an idea, and they come to me and say, well, I've got this idea. Should I start a company? Should I start a business? And I always run them through the 4 axes, and that always highlights, some weaknesses and some things that they haven't thought about. So I think the principle of alignment apply at the very beginning. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. Now, the measurement and the precision of measurement is higher if you have more customers. Not so much the revenue number, not the dollar amount, but how many customers you have. Because if you're doing $10 million in revenue with 3 customers, then you cannot really measure statistically. But if you're doing, $500,000 with 2,000 customers, then you can actually measure.
Right. I mean, your sample size,
matters.
Again, going back to your physics background,
Right.
I mean, your sample size makes a big difference.
That's right.
The 4 precision alignment that you're talking about, that methodology seems to be something that you've used throughout your career. How, I guess, in your book and on your guys' website and stuff like that are resources to help people with this. How, as a small business, is this something you would continue working with someone that's a small business with this, or do you have strategic partners that help with this? How does that work?
Well, we engage directly with the CEO of the company.
Okay.
So the CEO contacts us and say, well, I'm growing at that rate. I'm flat, or I'm even decreasing my business. I want to understand what's going on. So they hire us. We do a full assessment and measurement of those 4 axes, and then we deliver a growth playbook, which is again this action plan, and that tells them what to do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Whether they implement it or not is up to them, not up to us. So it's like we're a doctor. We're going to give a prescription. If the patient says, well, I don't really like those pills, we said, that's fine, don't take them, but you're probably not going to grow. And that's up to you. So that's how we engage. We tend to work with larger companies, but we do work with smaller companies as well that have a high growth potential and that want to grow faster.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that's important, in going through this is, like you've said, you've worked with people who just have started out with an idea and looking at this alignment, and you've also done it with people that have been in business for a while. So basically, it's not too late to start now, even if you've been in business for 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, I think that. So we just, to give you an example, and this is an extreme. We just finished an engagement 2 weeks ago of a company that's doing $12.5 billion in revenue. It's publicly traded. Now, that's not the typical customer.
Right.
Now, our typical customers is 10 million to a few $100 million, but there's many companies below 10 million that are just starting. And I always tell them, I said, the 4 axes of alignment are really critical. And in fact, you're in a better position because as you're young, you can easily adapt and change. It's very hard to move $1 billion business, really hard. But if you're doing, $500,000 and you have, 20 or 30 customers and you want to go to the next level, then in a way, you're in a better position to be successful because your ability to change and not be content with the status quo is much, much higher. And we see that all the time. And startups, they don't have revenue. So for us, it's hard to help them because we have to start somewhere. But I do tell them, to read the book and watch my TED Talk and say, really think about those 4 axes. You don't need to work with us. You need to hire us, but you need to think about it very hard. It's like, can you define your pain, the pain of your customers in 1 sentence? Can you define, the target market? How many people have that pain? And how do you get in touch with them? How do you engage with them? That's your go-to-market strategy. And then can you describe your claim in 1 sentence? And then can you prove that it's unique? Can you prove that it works? How do you support it? Do you have examples? Are any other companies making the same claim? And are their claim better than yours? And maybe they are, and that's okay. But we have to understand why. So the thinking process is really important and is the same regardless of the size of the company.
Now, if somebody implements this and they do what you're talking about doing, how often do you recommend that they kind of take that step back to look to make sure that they've kept this alignment?
Yeah, it's a really good question because there are 2 reasons misalignments get introduced. One is because the market is changing and we live in a very dynamic market. So you're aligned and then the market changes on you and then you have to realign. And sometimes you don't even realize the market has changed. And it's like, well, why am I not growing? Well, it's because the way people buy now is completely different from the way they used to buy even 6 months ago.
Right.
So that's one example. The other one is what I call the enforced error in tennis, which is you making a mistake, you missing a shot, but there's no reason you missed a shot. You were there, you anticipated, and somehow you missed it. And company gets misaligned because they make mistakes. They make a change that makes them become misaligned. So the misalignment is not created by the external force, not the market, but it's created by their own doings.
Right.
So to answer your question, I think a good rhythm is to do this every year, once a year. It's like every year, I think you should step back and maybe you do a retreat with your executive team, but you step back and said, okay, let's just, last year we were a 9, we were happy, but what changes have we made that perhaps made us misaligned, or has the market dynamic changed so that we need to be aware of that? This is not something you do every month, but at least once a year, I think it's a good cadence.
So, and then, I mean, obviously, we COVID was a couple of years ago. Still, I think we all saw where that changed the market, and it really changed people's alignment. Sure. Even though you thought that you were changing to stay with it, you weren't.
Yeah.
How has that changed your thought on, the 4 pieces of alignment?
Well, it's like it really hasn't changed anything. In fact, it reinforced it, which is a prime example of a market very quickly, dynamically changed. And then the companies that have embraced that change and understood and start using tools and reorganize themselves to work in a way where employees are not coming to the office anymore, those companies have been thriving and have been doing really well. And so COVID was a really interesting case study for us, because it's like, okay, this is an example where the market dramatically changes almost overnight,
Right.
something that nobody has really foreseen. And then we looked around and we said, well, those companies have understood that market change, and they have reconfigured themselves very quickly and very successful. And then companies that are just panicked and froze and were not able to realign, and those companies have suffered and haven't grown as much as they could have.
Right. We've covered a lot of stuff here quickly, and it's like, I find the business side of this, fascinating, and the alignment, and I've listened to your TED Talk, and it's like, it's definitely making me kind of stop and rethink my business, and okay, really, what is it that I want to do? So there's definitely going to be some realignment going on for me here.
That's right.
What question have I not asked you that you wish I had?
Well, you didn't ask me why I was so crazy to make it, to jump 1,000 times out of an airplane. Actually, I love, skydiving is, I have this example, and in fact, it's the last 30 seconds of my TED Talk, which I think are breathtaking, at least for me.
Yes.
Which is, this alignment about skydiving. And that a particular alignment, and I won't explain why it is, because I want people to watch it.
Right, exactly.
The video is so much better than me describing it. That alignment is a matter of death and life, and somehow it makes you realize that a small misalignment introduced into that endeavor would result in the death of somebody, and that, I think, is a really good example of why alignment is so critical. And in fact, if you look around you, you realize that alignment is everywhere. If you have, if you look at a brain surgeon, the alignment of the tool and what he's doing during the operation is critical. If you look at the orbital station, the alignment, when you calculate the trajectory, is really critical. If you look at the Blue Angels, I mean, they are 18 inches apart.
Okay.
They better be aligned. So if you really think about alignment, it's really everywhere around us, and we live in a world where alignment is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, what I find fascinating about what you've done, because again, like you said, I mean, alignment is around us, but I've never seen anybody from a business standpoint put it out there like you have, because there are so many different things that need to be aligned for a business to be successful, but nobody's looked at it the way that you're looking at it. So to me, that's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning more.
Thank you.
If people like what they hear, how can they reach out to you, find your TED Talk, find your book, find you?
Yeah, so I mean, the best is just to use my first and last name, Philippe Bouissou, and my TED Talk is on YouTube, so you just do a search on my name, you'll find it immediately. My book is on Amazon. You can find it immediately as well. It's called Aligning the Dots, as you mentioned. And if they want to reach out to me, I mean, the best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. And they can also go on our website, which is bluedotspartners.com, with an S at the end of dot and an S at the end of partners. So it's bluedotspartners.com. And then they will find more information and even case studies of how we use this alignment methodology to help businesses grow faster.
Great. Philippe, I really appreciate your time. The wisdom that you have when it comes to business growth is unparalleled, in my opinion. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on your show. You have a great show, and thank you so much again for helping share this idea of alignment and growth.
Great, thank you. This week, our guest was Philippe Bouissou, who is the managing partner with Blue Dots Partners. Thank you, and I'll see you.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.